I have a soft spot for Nokia, not because it won, but because it lost in a way that teaches more than most victories ever could. And if you've ever built anything long enough to see the ground shift beneath your feet, you'll understand why this story cuts deeper than a simple rise and fall case study. Nokia is not a cautionary tale about stupidity or laziness. It is a story about success so complete that it quietly blinds you about transformation attempted too late, and about survival that looks nothing like dominance. Most people remember Nokia as the king of mobile phones that missed the smartphone revolution. That memory is convenient. The truth is far more uncomfortable. Nokia did not start in technology, let alone telecommunications. It began in the 19th century as a pulp mill in Finland, then evolved into rubber boots, cables, electronics, and eventually telecom infrastructure. Reinvention was not foreign to Nokia. It was embedded in its DNA. This matters because it destroys the lazy narrative that Nokia couldn't change. Nokia changed many times. The real question is why this particular change broke it. And the answer has less to do with innovation and more to do with psychology. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Nokia wasn't just winning. It was defining the market. Its phones were everywhere, trusted, durable, intuitive. For millions of people, mobile phone meant Nokia. That level of dominance does something dangerous to an organization. It replaces curiosity with certainty. When you own the present, the future starts sounding like a distraction. Nokia optimized relentlessly: battery life, signal strength, hardware reliability, supply chain efficiency. All the right things for the world as it existed then. And that was the trap. Inside Nokia, there were smart people who saw the shift coming. Touchscreens were discussed. Software complexity was debated. Internet-enabled phones were prototyped. The myth that Nokia didn't see the smartphone wave is false. It saw it. What it couldn't do was agree on what it meant, or move fast enough without breaking the machine that was printing billions. Symbian Nokia's operating system was not stupid. It was burdened. It had been shaped to serve hundreds of device variations, carriers, and regional demands. Flexibility at scale became rigidity in evolution. Then the iPhone arrived, and it didn't just introduce a new product, it introduced a new definition. Phones were no longer primarily communication devices. They became software platforms. User experience trumped specs. Developers mattered more than carriers. Nokia evaluated the iPhone through old lenses: battery life, network constraints, enterprise concerns. Apple evaluated the future through behavior. That difference is fatal. When two companies look at the same object and see different realities, the one aligned with user behavior usually wins. What followed inside Nokia was not ignorance, but fear. Fear of cannibalizing existing products. Fear of alienating partners. Fear of betting the company on an unproven direction. This is the silent killer of giants. Startups jump because there is nothing to fall from. Leaders hesitate because there is everything to lose. Nokia tried to hedge: multiple platforms, internal competition, committees instead of convictions. Each decision made sense locally. Together, they slowed the organism until it could no longer react. By the time Nokia realized that software ecosystems were the new battlefield, it was already late. Android was spreading. iOS was consolidating. Developers had chosen sides. Nokia's eventual partnership with Microsoft was not a bold play. It was a last stand. Windows Phone was elegant, but elegance without momentum is decoration. The market had moved. Consumers had moved. And once behavior locks and technology alone cannot pull it back. From the outside, this looked like collapse. Market share evaporated. Pride turned into layoffs. A company that once defined mobile communication sold its phone business and faded from consumer consciousness. This is where most stories end, with a moral about disruption and a warning not to get complacent. But that ending is incomplete because Nokia did not die. It shed a skin. Stripped of its phone empire, Nokia returned to something quieter and less glamorous: networks, infrastructure, deep technology. No billboards, no hero products, just hard problems. 4G, 5G, global connectivity. This was not a comeback in the Hollywood sense. It was a survival maneuver. Nokia accepted that it would no longer be loved by consumers, and instead chose to be needed by systems. That choice requires humility, especially after tasting cultural dominance. This is the incredible part of Nokia's transformation. It stopped chasing relevance and focused on resilience. It became a backbone company instead of a face. That is not failure. That is adaptation at a different altitude. Most companies cannot do this because their identity is too tightly coupled to their peak. Nokia let go of being iconic in order to remain alive. Few leaders have the stomach for that trade. The lesson here is not innovate or die. That's lazy. The real lesson is that timing, power, and fear interact in ways that no strategy deck can fully control. Nokia did many things right, but it could not overcome the inertia of its own success fast enough. And yet it also proved something else. Transformation is not always about returning to the spotlight. Sometimes it's about finding a form that the market no longer applauds, but still depends on. If you're building and you think transformation means staying cool, Nokia is your warning. If you think survival means clinging to what once worked, Nokia is your mirror. And if you believe that losing one battle defines the end of the war, Nokia's ongoing existence quietly disagrees as the story moves into its final, most uncomfortable phase, where we have to confront what it really means to win, what it means to endure, and why the most honest transformations rarely look like comebacks, but instead look like letting go of who you thought you were and continuing anyway, as the sentence carries forward into what comes next, where the definition of victory quietly changes, because once Nokia stepped away from the consumer spotlight, it was forced to confront a truth most companies avoid. For as long as possible, winning is contextual, and dominance is not the same thing as durability. In its new form, Nokia no longer chased applause. It chased relevance in places most people never look: network reliability, national infrastructure, standards bodies, long-term contracts. These are not stories that trend on social media, but they are the systems modern life collapses without. Nokia chose to matter quietly rather than sparkle briefly, and that decision rewired its entire identity. This phase of transformation is psychologically brutal. When you are used to being loved by millions, becoming invisible feels like erasure. Former engineers watched products they once poured their souls into become nostalgic memes. Former executives became footnotes in disruption essays. The market moved on, and Nokia had to make peace with that without collapsing into resentment. This is where many organizations die internally, even if they survive financially. They spend years trying to reclaim a past that no longer exists. Nokia slowly and painfully did something harder. It accepted reality and rebuilt around it. In infrastructure, there is no room for ego. Performance matters. Reliability matters. Politics matter. Nokia learned to operate in a world where innovation is incremental, trust is earned over decades, and failure has national consequences. This demanded a different kind of leadership and a different rhythm of thinking. No dramatic launches, no overnight wins, just sustained competence under pressure. It's not glamorous, but it's honest. And honesty is often the final form of maturity for companies that have lived through collapse. What makes Nokia's transformation incredible is not that it survived disruption, but that it survived irrelevance. Most fallen giants spend the rest of their existence pretending they're still relevant to the old audience. Nokia didn't. It stopped explaining itself to consumers and started delivering value to systems. In doing so, it found a place where its deep engineering culture could still win. This wasn't reinvention by trend. It was reinvention by alignment. For builders, this is the part of the story that rarely gets taught because it doesn't sell hope in the shiny way. The world loves comeback narratives. Nokia offers something more sobering and more useful. Sometimes you don't come back as who you were. Sometimes you continue as who you need to be. That requires letting go of validation metrics that once defined you and the version of success you originally chased. It requires redefining pride. Nokia's journey forces an uncomfortable question. If the market takes away the role you trained your whole life to play, would you still choose to stay in the game? Nokia answered yes, but on new terms. And those terms were not dictated by ego or nostalgia, but by capability and necessity. That is real transformation. Not pivoting because it's exciting, but pivoting because it's the only honest move left. Today, Nokia is no longer a cautionary tale of failure. It is a quiet case study in endurance. It stands as proof that losing the headline does not mean losing relevance, and that sometimes the most important contributions happen far away from the stage. The company that once put a phone in every pocket now helps keep the world connected in ways most users will never consciously thank. That is not a downgrade. It is a different kind of legacy. So when you hear people say, "Don't become the next Nokia," understand how shallow that warning is. The real danger is not becoming Nokia. The real danger is refusing to change when your moment passes. Or worse, believing that if you are no longer winning loudly, you are no longer winning at all. Nokia teaches us that survival after loss requires humility, clarity, and the courage to operate without applause. If this story made you rethink what transformation really looks like, stay with this channel. Subscribe, because this is where we talk about the journeys that don't fit into clean success frameworks. And leave a comment sharing what part of Nokia's story resonated with you most, because whether you are rising, falling, or rebuilding, these lessons matter most when the noise fades and only reality remains.